product quality is of vital importance, and when we talk about the different extraction techniques and the different methodologies themselves, for myself, often the product quality will dictate sort of like which extraction stream that will go into, and even products coming out of extraction may still have cannabinoids in them and go to a secondary extraction methodology or something like that. So maybe we could just talk a little bit about the products coming out of different cultivation methodologies, outdoor versus indoor, greenhouse versus hydro, and just what you feel, how different flowers should be processed, essentially, and what techniques should be used in order to produce those high quality flowers. Right. Because hemp farmers obviously are just going to use a byproduct and give you tens of thousands of biomass to produce, but greenhouse producers are obviously going to, just want to produce those high quality flowers.
No, it's a great topic. It fits right into what we're doing. And the reason we're doing so many different modalities of extraction is because the data that we will gather will be so valuable. If any of you know what surpassed oil and gas last year for the most valuable product on our planet, it's information. It was data. For the first time, it made more money than oil and gas. So that gives you an idea of the value. So when he's talking about, if we grow a particular flower, how are we going to process that flower? So that involves giving a small, quick little science lesson to everyone in the room. So there are these medicinal components that we're getting from cannabis are growing in these little things called trichomes. They're glandular trichomes. We call them the crystals. They're the shiny little things on the plant. When you look under a microscope, they look like a little mushroom with a little ball on them. If you look closely enough for long enough, like I did, you'll notice that there's different sizes and shapes trichomes. And there's actually 7 different kinds, but 3 of them are glandular and produce cannabinoids. So the 3 that we're talking about are what is the differentiator in what Darryl was talking about when, if we grow this particular flower, how should we process it? Well, what if we take this flower and we process it with water hash? Okay, well guess what? There are these 3 different types of trichomes. One is very tall, it's called a capitate stalk. One is a little bit shorter and it's called a sessile stalked. And the smallest one is just a ball that looks like it's sitting on the leaf, and that one is called bulbous. So when you're using extraction processes like water extraction that are using mechanical screen separations, whether you're bouncing it over screens, whether you're putting it in water and ice and mixing it and letting it fall down and settle through these screens, that extraction process will only access the 2 types of trichomes that are tall. The small bulbous one will become the differentiator between what I would do and what Rory would do. So I might take that herb with my company and run it through the bags and be like, I got 10% return. And then he's running it through his CO2 machine and going, I got 21% return. And it doesn't always work like that, but if you don't know that can be happening and you choose the wrong methodology of extraction, you can really shoot yourself in the foot. So it becomes more about not worrying about how much vegetative yields the plant is producing or even the size and shape of the plant. We want to focus on the chemovaric makeup of the plant. What is the cannabinoid profile and what is the terpene profile that plant is producing? And is it being given the proper nutrients and grown in a way that is allowing it to express itself to the maximum of its potential? Because that's the difference. We all think we have the best with cannabis. We're all cognitively dissonant in that sense, but there's really a word of God when you run these products and you extract them and you isolate them and you give them to someone who's an actual connoisseur. It stands out very, very quickly in regards to what we're talking about. And there's also the difference between, are we isolating for a monomolecular isolate like CBD, or are we trying to produce a high-end hash for a totally different market? Because a high-end hash, you want to grow those flowers really well. You want to take care of them all the way through, from the way you trim them, from the way you cure them, from the way they get processed into hash. Whereas if we're growing monomolecular isolates like CBD, you can just plant it in a field. It doesn't matter if bugs come and eat the plants. It doesn't matter, almost none of it matters. As long as you get your yield, you're running it through some scientific equipment that's going to molecularly separate the weights of the compounds. So
That being said, I'm sure Rory is a total processor that you see all sorts of product coming in and all sorts of product coming out, and even probably get different yields based on like the terpenes and other things. So maybe you can comment a bit on that.
So that's quite a thing, is where, you know, someone that's, you know, send down genetics to Jamaica and say, hey, we've been growing this type of genetics in Colorado or Cali, and it's been giving us this yield. We've extracted it using this process. They bring it down here, grow it here, send it to me, and say, hey, we should be still getting this type of yields. And when I return back that oil, it doesn't match up, and they're wondering, why am I doing something wrong? And it's like, no, it's because the genetics is going to change when it comes down here.
It's the terroir.
Yeah. And I know we can talk more about
Yeah,
that.
I'm sure you can comment for sure on the importance of matching not just the genetics to the soil and climate, but also the right fertilizer package, and how if you know, that is really one of the most important things. I mean, the genetics, I'm a geneticist, and I would like to say the genetics are everything, but at the end of the day, you know, the environment is drastically more important than the genetic, because it won't express its potential if it doesn't have the proper environment to grow in. So maybe you can comment a bit on that.
Right, because there's an interplay. We spoke about the trichomes and different types of trichomes. Now, that's the final, let's say the final thing you're looking for, say in a bud before you to do extraction. But before you get there, there are multiplicity of things happening that determine the quantity, the quality of these trichomes that you're going to find in the buds. And there are a number of considerations. Of course, there must be the genetics. The genetics must be right to provide these trichomes. And having these trichomes and the chemistry of the trichomes are also important. So you have to look, therefore, at chemistry through genetics. You have to look at the whole nutrition. You have to look at whatever impacts plant growth. So you have to look at climate. You got to look at temperature, humidity, just about everything. And the basic principle here is, if you go to the Leaves big law of minimum, it's that even though you supply all the inputs, the resources in all their sufficiency, your output is going to be limited to the scarcest input. So you could put everything in, everything. Your light is right, your CO2 is right, your humidity is right, but let's say your nutrients is not correct. And then when you talk about, say, nutrients now, you have a whole range of nutrients that must also be right. So you are going to be feeding calcium, potassium, nitrogen, but you did not feed sufficient magnesium, then your plant is just not going to produce at its maximum.
It even goes even deeper than that. Because there's also, the plant will either have the gene synthase to express these things we're looking for, or it will not. And then even more importantly, say you're giving it all these nutrients, but if you don't understand that the plant you're growing has been contaminated with fungi and bacteria, intercellular bacteria and viruses, those things can halt the plant from being able to pull up the proper nutrients that it needs. So what we're seeing now, which is a huge surprise to traditional people, as they always see it happen, that big ag has this methodology of putting in more inputs into the farm constantly and pulling less out constantly. But if you build a sustainable and a regenerative, like beyond organics, make it regenerative, so the inputs that you require from your farm can actually be produced on your farm. And that's when you have to put less in. That's when you're doing compost teas and you're creating living ecosystems and living soils. This is the way nature intended it to be. But as we became more successful at agriculture and we started doing road planting and we started doing all these things, well, we know what the problems with big ag on our planet right now are. And a lot of people are continually complaining about the over-regulation of cannabis. I think we can learn something from the regulations of cannabis, because we have deregulated our air and our water and our food to the point that poisonous chemicals have contaminated and infiltrated all of those systems. So I suggest we take a page out of cannabis and look at re-regulating some of the things that sustain all life on Earth.